What's up, YouTube? Churchconsulting.com. Talking today about mental health in the church. And listening to a podcast this morning from, I think the name of the podcast is The Unstuck Church. Very good episode my father-in-law sent me about mental health and about the conversation that continues, rightly so, thankfully so, on this topic when it comes to fear, anxiety. And I would throw in there, those are like I call it the fad, is fear, anxiety, and depression, but I would throw in there shame, loneliness, unhappiness. Those are the things that I think have been added, if you want to call it that way, to the conversation, or need to be, because fear, anxiety, and depression, it used to be that you had an alcoholic, a person dealing with alcoholism or with drug addiction, so you kind of understand the whole thing, right? But when it comes to anxiety and depression, people still don't understand the kind of the packet that comes with it. It's not just that you feel depressed, it's what comes before and after. So you're talking about a ton of different things that you have to understand and figure out in this very important topic. And as I said, it goes beyond just, prayer or even therapy. And so in 2013, so 6 years ago, I think it was around this time, February, March. My goodness, potholes. I did a conference at my friend's church, and 100 people showed up, called Finding Grace Through Anxiety. I literally, if you've heard my story, I thought 5 people would show up. I asked my other church friend, I said, can I borrow your office? I didn't have a church at the time. And he said, you need like a hall. A lot of people are going to show up, and that's exactly, he was right. After that, I had people saying, can you do this in Spanish? I did a bunch of videos online. You can check those out at davidtree.com/anxiety. And then I spoke to, at least 3 or 4 different places on the topic. Very, very helpful. I became a mental health certified mental health advocate. I'm not a therapist, but a mental health advocate. And you would think that my message per se was accepted widely, but not really, not always. I remember I went to this one leadership meeting with a lot of pastors, maybe 50, 75 pastors, and I talked about depression. I mostly deal with anxiety and all that goes with that, fear and loneliness and all that stuff. And I had half the group literally, it felt like they were all walking out on me. They just were not having it. They thought, no, man, just got to pray. What do you do with the passage where it says, confess your sins to each other? What do you do with all those verses that talk about community and relationship when it comes to healing? James talks about how we are healed when we confess our sins to each other, when we talk to other people. What do you do with that? Those verses. What do you do with Galatians 6, where it says that we ought to carry each other's burdens? What is that, just financial problems? What about mental health problems? So it doesn't say to pray, it says to carry each other's burdens. There's obviously some process there. But I understand, and I would say that I've come a long way, let's just call it that way, in balancing things. I do pray more about mental health stuff, and I do pray for people. I always have, but meaning I do it more than, let's say, I talk about the steps and the plans and more of the psychology and quote the secular. I don't believe in that whole secular stuff. I mean, it's all sacred. But anyway, you know what I mean, right? And you have to also know your audience. Some people just aren't ready to hear words like trigger and integration, much less therapy or medication or antidepressants. I mean, they would, and it's cultural. I would say Latino cultures and African American cultures, Asian cultures are not as open to these things. They're more apt to say, I'm going to talk to my mom, maybe talk to a pastor, definitely talk to God, but not to a therapist, and no medication and no any of that stuff. But it's I remember I had this one lady, going back to negative people. I was at Saddleback hosting a table, manning a table, tabling on mental health and my show and all these things. And this lady that was at this other event that I did came up to me and said, "You shouldn't be talking about this. These are private. These things are private." She was all mad. My guess is that she had a sister, or maybe she herself dealt with mental health issues, and she was just embarrassed that someone was talking about it so openly. Interesting. And so, but it doesn't matter. We have to talk about this because it's not just Mac Miller and hip-hop artist or your favorite comedian that ends their life through suicide. We're talking about your youth leader, your friend, a family member. These are things that are happening to us all the time. Back in 2013, right after I did all that, meaning the conference and all that, I also wrote an article on Leadership Online, or Leadership Magazine. I think it's died since. Now it's just online. You can still look it up online. I think it's August 2013. And it was this huge article, 4 pages, written by me, yours truly. I know, I'm famous. And it was called High Anxiety. It wasn't called, I sometimes deal with a little bit of sadness. It was just, it actually, at first it shocked me. I thought, oh, wow. But now, I'm so thankful that the editors called it that, because it's not about that's how it feels. Of course it feels like high anxiety. It needed to ring a bell. And it's been 6 years since then, 7 years. And our society has become more anxious. We used to be the achiever culture, now we're the anxious culture. And so out of anxiety and fear, people act out. I had this one friend, church leader, last year, who had a major event happen in her business. And when she came into our meeting, she was just going off on these guests. They were presenting this project. And when the guests got done, this one lady, she just went on and on and on in a panic mode. And I had never seen that from her. But it made sense. She was in a place of anxiety. She obviously deals with major anxiety, fear, maybe a feeling that the world is unsafe. So you may not think of it as, oh, I don't deal with anxiety, but you sure are acting it out. It could be eating, it could be pornography, it could be anger, it could be, the typical alcohol and drugs. But sometimes it could be hiding online. Maybe you're being promiscuous. I have friends that's where it shows up, is their promiscuity. And now, not everyone deals with this, so that's the good news. My wife doesn't. So it's not everyone. Half the people, I would say, maybe half the population, a third, fourth, enough of the people. Now, if you talk about Enneagram stuff, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, if not, go to EnneagramInstitute.com and just look up Richard Rohr or my friend AJ Sherrill or typology podcast with, what's his name? Great guy, Enya Graham. There are a lot of amazing spiritual podcasts, Christian podcasts, if you need that talk about this. But if you talk about the Enneagram, the 6 is the anxious one. I think half my church is a 6. I think half my house is a 6. Our 6s. I know I'm either a 3 or a 6 or a 9. You know, the triangle or a 3, 6, 9 thing. So not to get into the Enneagram too much, but just to talk a little bit about the Enneagram and the 6, only because it applies to anxiety. Now, before I keep going, there are two sides to this whole thing, anxiety and depression. So if you're more of a depression person, a little different narrative or story or things you tell yourself, that's more Elijah. I think for anxiety, I think of Moses. For depression, I use Elijah. So you may want to look up those characters. And my friend, as I said, A.J. Sherrill, wrote a great book called The Enneagram and the Way of Jesus. Check it out. It's a thin book. If you want it, leave me a comment below. I can send you one for, I think it was $13. I'll send you a Goso cup just for free. But he talks in there about different biblical characters. He talks about Peter as the ultimate 6, the anxious type who can do everything, and yet in the moment of truth he took his eyes off of Jesus and lost his safety. So for 6s, safety is a huge issue. That's the vice. The vice is fear. The vice is anxiety. The vice, but the virtue or like it, he connects it to the fruit of the spirit. The fruit of the spirit that we anxious types need is courage. Faith. To believe that it really is okay. Because the anxious mind, different than the depressed mind, the anxious mind tells you it's not okay. It's not going to be okay. Especially when it comes to authority figures. It's a whole doom and gloom, catastrophizing, worst case scenario. So you begin to prepare and think about what you're gonna do if the worst happens, or you might just be paralyzed with fear, and so then your body hurts. For me, it's my stomach. For you, it might be your back, your heart, some people, their teeth, all things I've dealt with. And so you have to go to I would say to two things, to God and then to a friend. To God, you go to the scriptures, of course. Psalm 91 is powerful for me. Those that, I forget how it starts, but something about in the shadow of his wings. That's really the part that gets me the most, is that we will find refuge. Maybe I think that's the word, or safety. I like to use the word safety under the shadow of God's wings. He is El Shaddai. He is the most powerful one. I don't have to protect myself, or I don't have to be the one to create safety or please people to feel safe. I can find my safety under the shadow of El Shaddai, of the Almighty. Of course, Joshua 1:9, be bold and courageous. Psalm 27, do not fear man. That's back to the 6. Huge for us 6s, because we fear authority, because we gave them control. We give them power. We admire them, but then we also give them our safety. It's almost like they have our health, our insurance card. And so you feel like you have to please them in order to be able to go to the doctor and get your medication. So it's this unhealthy fear of authority. And so you try to please authority, and then of course they can't give you safety. So then you fear the worst. So that's why Psalm 27 is so important. Other passages that helped me tremendously is, as I said, the story of Moses, how God was there when Moses may have felt that God wasn't there when he was in the in the basket. He wasn't there when he killed the Egyptian. He wasn't there when he was afraid. He wasn't there when he hit the rock. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. That's what Moses could tell himself, or Peter could say, well, you weren't there. You died. Where did you go? You told me to walk on water. Why didn't you hold me up? And that's what the fear ruminating mind does. We're the head type, so we're in our head, constantly thinking the worst. And like this podcast was saying, it's not as if we eventually, by overthinking, we eventually come up with the answer. It only gets worse. The more we ruminate and the more we think about things, things get worse. It's exactly what happens. It's so true. So you have to break the spell by actually saying, you were there. So for me, I have this very classic scene when I was at Long Beach City College and I had no documentation to register, and I always tell the story of how I had to do that on my own. And I did this and I did that and I had to, and I sweated and I felt nervous and anxious. But then God gave me this powerful clarity about, I don't know, a month ago, that he was there. And it was powerful because then I began to go through all of these false stories. I mean, they're real stories, but false narratives where I thought I was alone, and to realize that God was there. Powerful for the anxious type, to realize that God was there. There are a lot of techniques that I use, and I've recorded videos on this. You can check them out at davidtruder.com/anxiety, as I said. I've done conferences. I'm certified. I take medication still to this day. I will the rest of my life. I love it. You know what I mean. I'm okay with that, is what I mean to say. It doesn't affect me. 5-10 milligrams of Celexa, I think it is. I've had different kinds. That's the one that seems to work for me the most. And I go to therapy just about every week. I've been going for 20 years. People say, well, it hasn't helped. Well, it's not to fix you. It's to keep working things out. That's why you go to therapy, to talk to a friend, a trusted. You're buying accountability. You're buying accountability to have someone that knows you and that you know and you can talk to. So in conclusion, I'm going to do a second conference, Finding Grace Through Anxiety 2, in Spanish and English, here at my new church. March, right before Easter, maybe the weekend before Easter. We're going to celebrate life by talking about mental health. And so I'm excited. So if you want to register, just go to davidtruder.com/anxiety. You'll see a link there, and just put in your email and you'll be on the waiting list. It'll be a free event, and then we'll sell courses, my ebook, videos that I've made, so that we can pay for the event. I am probably going to have some of my therapist friends come and also speak alongside of me. I'll be the main blabber, but it's good to have other people. When I did this the first time, I had my therapist, a nurse, I had another therapist, I had all kinds of great people, guests that spoke alongside of me. So that's what we'll do. Okay, I gotta go. See you next time.